Well, you knew it was going to happen. We couldn't go through a month of ABT Lockdown Live without having this man on. This is Chris, Captain Risky, Hickson, mate, and we finally caught up with you. On the mid-north coast of New South Wales, mate, you are in the Shed, which is a place that holds all your fishing gear, and I assume it's a place where you have to live when you've been a naughty boy. Is that right?
It's an absolute shit fight at the moment too. There is crap everywhere.
So some people use the isolation times to really go through and fine-tune their gear. They clean the house, mow the lawns, everything's mint. That's not your plan?
Did a bit around the house. Fishing gear got pretty well neglected, but it was because we're allowed to go fishing still. Everything was in the offshore boat, and that's all that got looked at. So pretty much all the rest of the gear's thrown all over the shed and all over the fishing room, and I'll get to it when I get to it.
So isn't it weird that this week we would have been have already finished fishing the Daiwa Australian Open, and instead you're hanging out around the continental shelf somewhere, deep dropping for barcodes?
Yeah, well, that's I think I just had a notification come up on my calendar on my phone that said it was Bream Australian Open time. So I think Babs and I were out at sea last weekend, and both of us said the same thing. It was one of the best days we've ever had in the ocean, ever. It was calm. There was no current. We both were looking at each other going, how good is it being here and not at a tournament for once? Because it's not very often you get to say it, but that was one weekend you wanted to be at sea.
Now, the Australian Open, and we've talked to people tonight, everyone we interview about the Australian Open typically says if there was just one Bream tournament I could fish a year, I would probably do the Australian Open. Like everyone else, are you a lover of that Sydney Harbour arena?
Oh, yeah, it's the best, one of the best arenas in the country. And the fact that we went from just the harbour to 3 days split between the harbour at the Hawkesbury and the harbour again, just threw another spanner in the works for us and made it an even better tournament. It's got to be so tactical to be able to figure out two giant waterways with only 1 day pre-fish between the two, if any. There's no other tournament in Australia like it, that's for sure.
Well, I tell you what, and I don't know if you know the history of this, but when we brought the Australian Open back after a 3-year hiatus in the mid-teens, when Franco brought it back, because Franco was the one that just, dropped his wallet on my foot and said, how much do I need to pay to bring this event back? And we made a deal. I said, wouldn't it be cool if we had an event which was 1 day on the Hawkesbury, 1 day on Botany Bay, and then 1 day on Sydney Harbour? And he said, that's an awesome idea, Morgo, but I hate Botany Bay. Let's take that out of it. So as it happened, it would have been 3 days on 3 arenas, apart from the fact that the naming sponsor, well, I listen to them and we give them a bit of say in it. So look, that it's definitely a testing event, and you can't pre-fish you can't fish one of those arenas in a week, let alone 2 of them in 1 day. So I suppose it really suits your style, which is let's make it up as we go along.
Yeah, just wing it, pretty much. I'm kind of glad it's not 3, because 3 logistically makes it a bit challenging. I know we've talked about it forever through ABT times as how good it would be to have a multi-venue tournament, and that was the perfect opportunity to do it. And thanks, Franco, again, as everyone would, for getting that back on board, because everyone that I know that loves tournament fishing loves the Oz Open, and having it back in the calendar is just, it's perfect. So yeah, the fact you can't fish the 2 arenas is you can pre-fish both of them if you know where you want to go and check out. So if you've got half a dozen spots in Sydney Harbour that takes you a couple of hours to pre-fish, you rip in there, chuck the boat in, jump around, check a couple of spots out, you're done, pull the boat out, go to the Hawkesbury, do the same thing. And to be honest, between Sydney Harbour, the Hawkesbury, and say Middle Harbour, you could probably pre-fish those 3 separate areas in a day if you had certain spots to go and check out. I generally don't. I can't even remember where I've pre-fished the last couple. I think I've done Sydney Harbour in one I pre-fished, and the Hawkesbury in the other, just to check some stuff out. But yeah, it's a matter of banking on which one you're going to you're probably going to struggle the most in and try and work that out. So yeah, it's just so much area to cover. Like, you can go from bloody Wiseman's Ferry to Gosford in the Hawkesbury. Like, how are you going to work that out in a 2 days, let alone half a day?
I couldn't even work that out on a tank of fuel, mate. I'd be out halfway through.
No way. So you just got to, like, lucky for myself, I've been fishing both arenas for a long time, same as yourself. You've got a fair bit of backup there and a reasonable idea on what's going to go on. For the newcomers, it'd be pretty hard, but there's some guys there that just are able to figure that stuff out. So it's one of those tournaments that it really is anyone's game, unless they're on Sound Pigs Reef and you're throwing cranker grabs like Jamie.
Yes, indeed, and we'll be talking to Jamie later in this show because he smashed it last year. I think with a record bag for the Australian Open, his average size fish was off the charts. Uh, After Franklin's sponsored the Australian Open for those first 2 years after he came back, it was in 2017, 2018. Dyer took over the reins last year and it became the Dyer Australian Open, and that fell right into your wheelhouse as Dyer was golden boy, mate. It must have been a good opportunity for them that they obviously then took up with, putting cameras on your boat and stuff like that. It's when was the last Open you fished without media on your boat?
Can't remember. Probably. I think I've had media for pretty much since the start of it's come back, since it was the Franklin's Open. So, Dyer being a naming sponsor for it, I have a feeling back when I won the Australian Open, Dyer was a sponsor back then as well.
Yep, for 2 years, Dyer was a sponsor there before they fell out of tournament fishing for a while. So I think it's good karma maybe. And look, it's always.
I don't know about karma. I've had Brett Habner from Dyer on it for the last year, and he's the worst curse I've ever had on the boat.
Well, we got Brett on the show tonight as well, so I'm going to ask him that question as well. But the Australian Open's really not a tournament you win. It's a tournament you lose, and the guy holding the trophy at the end is normally the guy that hasn't shanked any of the days. You know, like if you box every big fish you get on every day, you're going to be pretty much up there. It's very hard not to shank something for 3 days in a row.
I've pretty much shanked the last 2 years straight. There's it's a rare day on the harbour or the Hawkesbury where you don't hook a couple of good fish, like big fish.
Yeah.
If you stick them, you're right up the top. Like you can catch average fish all day and be in the top 5. Yeah. You need to put those big girls in the boat. And Brett can attest for it last year. And I think Bergie, when he was filming me like a couple of years ago, the amount of big fish I lost in those 2 tournaments, 100% cost me the tournament. Yeah. But there's probably 10 other guys in the field that have done exactly the same thing. So, as you said, it's not you don't win it, you lose it for sure. And the guy that comes out on top's the one that's had the best run. And we say it all the time, when it's your time, it's your time. Like that, the year I won the Oz Open, didn't do anything too special, just caught fish and didn't lose any. Like the kicker fish, a 37 forker for me on the last day in place. I should never have got it out. It came out and went in the boat. They're the times you win. So when you lose them, you know you've got to work so much harder. But anyway, that's what it is. That's tournament fishing.
Let's put it into perspective. We've got some cutaway footage running here of when you were allowed to fish under the Manly ferry dock, mate. And when you say, I hook some big fish and lose them, check out this shit that you're throwing into at Manly Ferry there, mate. It's not as if you're hooking something on the middle of a sandy flat and your drag was a bit tight. You are throwing in some of the nastiest shit imaginable. But you need to do that in these urban waterways to hook the big ones, don't you?
Yeah, you got to risk it for the biscuit and that joint. I think Mango used to say when we were fishing bets there, it was like cockroach fishing. It was always up in the deep, dark corners where the cockroaches lived, which is pretty spot on. But that ferry wharf was pretty hectic. It fired once every now and again. It was a long drive to get there. Sometimes you had to smash through the rough. But I had a lot of other areas around it that I liked. So it was one of those you'd call in. If the fish were there, good. If they weren't, so be it. And that day that you've got the footage of where I pulled that thing out, I think I'd been done by like 3 before it or 4 before it. Yeah. But it should never have come out of where it did. It was just one of those days. And I still didn't win. I think that was like the only big fish out of about 10 I hooked that day. Yeah. And it was the first one.
Well, you know, you do have to risk it for the brisket. We definitely know that you risk it, mate. You work at a tackle shop, so I suppose your propensity to throw lures into nasty country isn't as severe as most people because they might only cost you trade price instead of retail price. Tell us how's Manning River Marine coping through this lockdown, mate? What's going on in the mid-north coast at Manning River?
It's been pretty good, mate, to be honest. We had a lot of work booked in leading up to when all this happened, so right at the start, we were wondering whether we were going to be classed as an essential service. And we got an email through pretty quick because we do a lot of SES and service boats. And the fact that we deal with maritime, roads maritime, all that sort of stuff, registrations and that sort of thing, we got an email through pretty early on to say we were going to stay open and that, we're technically an essential service. The first couple of weeks was pretty dead. The floor traffic died down when everyone sort of freaked out a bit, and we're doing the right thing by staying away. No one knew whether they could go fishing officially. Everything was up in the air. But once that actually settled out, like we were busy. We still had a lot to do. But I just pretty much sat on the computer, loaded stuff on eBay that we needed to clear out from the store that's been sitting there forever, and just used the time productively. But once it all got settled in, we've been busy, like quite busy. New South Wales is lucky we were allowed to go fishing still and allowed to travel to a certain extent, even though it was locally. We've got a lot of fishing on the mid-north coast, really close. So, yeah, we've been doing pretty well. We don't have a website. I don't have the time to do in-store and fish tournaments and run a website. If there's anyone out there that's good at IT, you want a job, got one. But, yeah, just been loading stuff on eBay flat out, pretty much, just clearing out old stock and, yeah, putting some bargains out there.
Awesome, mate. You'd be well known for running your Mercury-powered Bass Cat across the country. You ran a Mercury-powered Phoenix for many years, but you finally stepped up and, of course, supporting the sponsors like we all like to do. How's that rig working out for you? It's an absolute weapon of a boat. Give us some numbers that thing spits out.
It's a gem, hey. It's taken me a while to love it, but I'm starting to love it. After coming out of a Stratus for 5 years or 4 years into a Phoenix, which is essentially the same boat, just a foot longer for another 5 years. I pretty much was at one with those things. I knew every last detail of it. I knew how to drive it. I jumped in it and I felt comfortable. Jumping in the Bass Cat, completely different boat, completely different setup, different way of driving them. And initially it was a challenge. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was a different beast. It plenty of horsepower, but it was took a while to tame it. But the last run I had down to Lake Mulwala, I was with Bryn Matthews down there for a cod tournament recently, and finally felt like I knew how to drive the thing, and it's been unreal. So I haven't had time to play around with props much with it to get the numbers out of it. It's similar speed to the Phoenix, so mid to high 70s on a good day. I'm sure we can probably get a little bit more out of it, but the fact with this new, like, that hull with that V8 on it is just so efficient. It's ridiculous. I use so much less fuel now.
Yeah,
I think going across Gippsland Lakes earlier in the year, and I did a video, calm morning. I think I was sitting on maybe 80, 85 kilometres an hour, and I think I was using 2.2 litres per kilometre.
2.2 kilometres per litre.
Yeah, it was like in the Verado, even though it was a great engine, if I had to hammer down a little bit, it was sucking the juice. Like, that thing used 110 litres an hour.
Yeah.
I think the new V8's using about 80 at the most. So
yeah.
It's a good on it, all the good kit. So love it.
Mate, one final question I got for you is you fished the Australian Open this week. It's your last day in Sydney Harbour. Give us your rod, reel, lure, and what sort of country you'd throw it in to catch yourself the kicker fish that you'd need to win the Open. If you had an hour left to go, what and where would you be fishing to catch your 1.4 keg you're going to need to get across the line?
Oh, shit, that's hard because I never catch a big fish in the same place in Sydney Harbour, really. Some guys have their areas that's where they get the big ones. I think I know where I catch the big ones, but normally I go back and I get nothing. So I dare say it'd be maybe an in-feet, so something nice and soft. So if it did hook a big one, I didn't want to muscle it out, I'd be using really light line to try and get that last bite. It's always a toss-up whether you go heavy and drag it out or whether you go light to get the bite. Normally at the end, it's whatever's left rigged up. So it's probably going to be whatever rod I've got left with leader and a lure on it. It'll be some nasty structure, probably a pole or a dock or something like that. I'd caught a fish on before. Being last minute, I'd say it'd be east of the bridge in the Clearwater. And it'd either be just a 2.5 inch grub covered in about half a kilo of scent, or the same. Just in and wait for a big girl to eat it. And if you had an hour to go, it'd be just covering ground as quick as you can.
Yeah, and look, we've all had those days at the Open where you've got a good limit in the box, but in your mind, you don't know if it's enough. You don't know if someone's brought a 6 kilo limit in, because we've seen those in the past, Reedy and Greg Lee and all those guys in the day that brought in those giant limits. They're there.
Yeah, they are. That's literally every day in the Open or every day in the harbour. It doesn't matter how good a day you have there. In the back of your mind, unless you crack 5.5, 6 kilos, which I never do, you always know there's someone that's got a big bag, then you're coming in, like, no matter what. So it's not one of the tournaments that I try and swing for the big girls initially. It's just a matter of putting really good fish in the bag every day and hoping that no one did better.
Awesome, mate. Really appreciate you catching up with us tonight. I've got one more one more question I've got to ask you. What would you say to those Victorians who are good anglers? They're good on the black brim. Why do we have trouble getting Victorians to the Oz Open, mate? What would your advice to be Victorians that want to have a crack at it? They all want us to take an Australian Open to Victoria. How do we get a Victorian to Sydney Harbour because it's such a great fishery?
Just drive up there. Unless you fish Sydney Harbour, you don't know what you're missing out on. It's not that hard. If I can go down to Victoria, to Gippsland Lakes and catch big old black brim, you can come to Sydney Harbour and catch those yellowfin, because I guarantee it's a lot easier than what you got down there.
I second that. It is, if Northerners can come and raid Gippy Lakes, they owe it to us to come and raid Sydney Harbour and take some of that sweet prize money. Chris Hickson, thanks for joining us tonight, mate, on ABT Lockdown Live. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll see you on the show.
Cheers, mate. Thank you, and stay safe, mate.